The main aim is to bring back the schools football back in our schools. When SAFA took the responsibilities of schools football, it was saying kids are only playing once off. Of course, there is work which has been done by SAFA. We have seen that results when it comes to women football. And that's where you also need to also take your coaching courses to schools. Make them specially designed for schools. Clubs must work with recognized agents. I've dealt with cases where South African players were taken to foreign countries. There is a person who said I'm an agent and took kids to England. They were sleeping on the streets.
Hey, listen, we've made it to episode 5 of Behind the Boot with Super Journal. And thank you so much for your support on the social media. We've seen your interaction. We've seen your engagement on SmashSports as well. My next guest, former SAFA CEO. He's returned as the COO of the Federation. And we've got a lot to discuss. COO, thank you for being part of Behind the Boot with Super Journal. Maybe my first question could be in way of introduction. You know, we know your role in the past and having returned to the Federation now, but also a lot of us know you as Advocate Motlanthe, you know. But why football? Why the football space? Why not pursue being a lawyer, kadigao, no, every day in the high courts, in the magistrate court?
Look, Mazola, thanks first for having invited me here. It's nice to be here. Yeah, look, I think it started at the university. I always say to people, I never lied and say I played the game. I was in student politics at the university, doing my own student politics things. Normally, I will be the secretary. So I was called by the internal university soccer league, which said, "Can you assist us with administration?" That's where the whole thing started. That's at the University of Venda, where the former SAFA president, Kirsten Namatendan, was the director of sports. Then graduated 2009, had choice to have gone with the Gowns. And it was a great moment that the World Cup was coming. And he convinced me to say, let's go to the World Cup. Then he got elected SAFA president. He says, now let's come. And I started with SAFA as a legal officer, of course, mainly focus on the legal things, statutory things. Then later became the general manager, membership and legal. And I will say I found the space very much interesting, and that's why I stayed for the past 11 years.
In you coming back now, having been SAFA CEO and now COO, I read the statement. I think it was around August when you officially, I think you were already there behind the scenes, uli busy, but officially when the statement came out, they detailed your mandate quite nicely in terms of what is expected as your role, and that builds up nicely. It's a nice segue to our discussion today. One of them being to strengthen school sport, to help what we want, SAFA that is, we want the FIFA Women's and Men's World Cups, we want AFCON, we want WAFCON, we want to strengthen our administration and also work on the 2031 FIFA Women's World Cup bid as well. What do you make of that? Is it something that the Federation can achieve, especially with you part of, you know, the group that pulls the strings together?
Look, I think the association is capable of doing that. And the role, as you say, I've not necessarily left the association for long, because they then said, can you do consultation work for us? I did consultation.
Correct.
And you'll know that with any hosting of any type, you will need legal documents in place, and that's where one comes in, and I think that is doable, because you need to get agreements, you need to get the hosts to put the host cities to put agreements, you need to check if they are compliant, and of course the key issue of schools football. You know that from the history that when SAFA took the responsibilities it required a lot of things, and it's still a contested terrain in that you have two departments. You have a Department of Sports, you have Department of Basic Education, and you have a sponsor who has an agreement with them. Yet football administrator must deliver it. So we are currently busy with a document which regulates, one, the relationship with the departments, and two, to say how do we move forward with schools football. What format do you want? What rules should apply for schools tournaments? Because one will say when SAFA took the responsibilities of schools football, it was saying kids are only playing once off.
Yeah.
They play Kmotsepe and nothing happens.
And then they disappear.
So the main aim is to bring back the schools football back in our schools, where kids are playing leagues of some sort. The committee on schools football will need to decide that once approved, but the work is already in place to ensure that we have right regulations. We have the constitution which will govern the relationship with outside stakeholders, because you'll not find that in the SAFA constitution.
Yeah.
So you need to have a set of rules which deals with engagement. And also empower to say you need the government departments to go out there and raise sponsorships together with SAFA as the custodian of football.
Well, we have, sorry to jump in there, but I was going to say we have a minister that seems to understand this notion. How crucial do you think he will be in this? And what is it that rugby, the sports that are perhaps one could say in the minority, in the majority from if you distinguish between black and white football players or rugby players or whatever the case may be, rugby and cricket seem to be getting it right, from developing talent identification from a school's point of view. But when it comes to football, before SAFA sort of absorbed it, and you would know the dynamics better, we seemed to be getting it right. There were constant tournaments, but was that not enough? Perhaps that's why SAFA decided we need to absorb this and then make a broader plan to improve school sport.
Look, there are a lot of contributory factors. One was schools football organized in the past. In the face, it looked like that. But do we say if out of thousands of schools, you only have less than 5,000 participating, are we saying we are running football? No. One must also acknowledge the work being done by the technical director of SAFA, Mr. Walter Steenbok. He has came back, he has introduced and say, let us not focus on under 17, let's start under 15 where it matters most. Of course, there is work which has been done by SAFA. We have seen that results when it comes to women football, where you have young girls identified throughout the provinces, put in the HPC, where you school them and you train them. Most of Banyana players, they graduated from there. But the other key aspect is you then instill that education and football goes together. That's why when you talk about women footballers, they have qualifications, they have degrees. Because you have instilled it from the beginning. And I've seen the TD is now going the boys' route to say, let's do the same. And maybe that will change. But we also, when you speak about cricket and rugby, they have commercial support. Because you understand, you can't move without money. So if the commercial, if the business come in and invest in this football, invest in these young ones. That's why I say the element of having sports and basic education together when you go out there. Because other sponsors will say, we'll invest. And educators say, no, it's my right. I can't be training kids during this time. It's my time. So you need to deal with those things. And that's where you also need to also take your coaching courses. To schools. Make them specially designed for schools. Make sure that these kids get, and there is a debate about the usage of former players, masters and legends. And you have seen them, they are equipping themselves with education. So I think once you get the base right with both departments and you get a commercial support, you'll go back where schools become hubs and you start competing with your rugby and cricket.
Did the federation not have these sponsors in the past? I think, as I said, you know the dynamics better. We had a Burger King. I remember, McDonald's one way or the other, and a Coca-Cola. I mean, I know this also from my father he's now retired, but he was a teacher and he was one of the soccer coaches. In fact, one of the people that saw Tebogo Motlanthe from a young age when he was only 12 years old playing for Buhlukung, Bethlehem High. And there were sponsors there, and it looked like these players were coming from these, commercially, if you speak of commercial backing. What happened in that sense? Are they pulling away because of this restructure, or they just decided to turn around the ship and focus on rugby and cricket, for instance?
No, I think investors want to invest where they will get returns. Investors shy away from a political environment. And what one should acknowledge that they SAFA taking back the responsibilities from SASFA. It was not a smooth process. It became a litigious process.
That's true. We covered those.
It went through arbitrations and later been tried to be reviewed in court. Investors don't want to be associated with those kind of issues. But one believes that with the assistance of the departments, as I emphasize, they are key role players. Having stability. Stability is you having SAFA in this department saying, this is a tangible program which will involve all schools. Former Model C schools, all schools be involved to play. Because you look at rugby and cricket, where are they going? Even though you may spot one or good talent in the township, once they spot that, they take that talent to a former Model C school. They take them to private schools. So football needs to go and open that and ensure that every kids get a fair chance and get to be seen. Like I said, the TD has done great work. You need to identify those. You need to have a similar setup like the one at HPC. Then you will start to see the benefits. And I think that the commercial partners will then come back because there will be stability.
And
I always say our problem as a country is we are more focused on politics. Politics, they are the ones which takes more center stage than the action of having kids playing football. Football is a simple sport. It just needs good administration and you have people playing.
And the kids just want to play. That's all they want to do, and the talent is there. Moving on to another, sort of section of your mandate, do you think we are capable of then, I know we've done the 2010 World Cup, and we've been accused of stadiums turning into legacy stadiums or white elephants. Can we pull it off from where you sitting?
Look, anything which you say South Africa can host. Facilities are there. You have seen CAF has now increased numbers in number of tournaments. You have an under-17 which is going to play on annual basis, these qualifiers. Can we host? Yes, recently with just small-scale thing. COSAFA hosted this under-17, which is, of course, is still in progress. So it tells you we have the capacity to host. Is just to deal with the other requirements. Because remember that also as a country, you don't want to be seen biased to football. And there is guideline from both SASCOC and the government on how you host international tournaments. So facility-wise, we are fine.
We're ready.
It's just to follow the right procedures.
Okay, that's nice just to get a sense of some of the things that you are busy with behind the scenes as you return to the mother body. A few years ago, you and I had a discussion where you were, back and forth out of the country in the county through a FIFA program of some sort to equip yourself in maybe even understanding the landscape more when it comes to disputes in football. How far did you get with that course?
Look,
did you bring your certificate along?
Yeah, I completed it. We graduated in Mexico. It was called FIFA Masters, FIFA Law Diploma. Yeah. So
how long was that course overall?
it was
I think our interview was like in 2021.
Yeah, it was about a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had to go to different countries. Yeah, we went to Miami, went to Mexico, Paraguay, and here in Africa we went to Egypt, and yeah. So it was one of the greatest eye openers because you look at what's happening in football. Football litigation has become one of the enemies which takes a lot of football development money because either people are not doing things right or just in our nature we like to challenge some of the things. But it was a great eye opener, and one should say that South Africa in the continent was given accolades in having the right dispute resolution mechanisms. They are not yet perfect. They need to be perfected. But what we have, most countries do not have. Because in South Africa, at least, you have independent panels.
Yeah.
In other countries, you find that politicians still sit on those panels. And of course, you have where it starts at the DC, you go to appeals board. And when you speak about professional league with what we have in this country, the PSL will have their DC and bring their appeals to the federation. That tells you of the independence. Then if you're not happy, you go to arbitration. If you're not happy, you can then go to case, which is quite expensive. And the courts of this country, remember that FIFA says you cannot take a football dispute to ordinary courts of law. But they say where your constitution permits, you can. And that's why we have seen most people, when they are not satisfied with the ruling of the internal judicial processes, they go to ordinary courts of law because in the Ndoro matter, Judge Fisher has made it clear that the decisions of arbitrators are reviewable.
You speak of these FIFA bans and clubs going, or even players going as far as the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I think now that it's run its course, this Royal AM case, I'm sure you'd be at liberty to discuss a few things. From where you sitting, having seen the back and forth between Samir Nukovic and Royal AM, and I think Royal AM tried to drag SAFA in that. When I read that that ruling from KES, it wasn't a public document, but I was able to get to get my hands on it. What went wrong there? And from your being equipped by FIFA to understand disputes, what was your assessment, both as an outsider looking in, but also as one of the top ras, if I can put it like that, within the mother body?
Yeah, look, wherever I've went, I've always said the fact that you employ an international player or coach, and when he's not happy, he can go to FIFA direct. It's a problem for me because it means you are bringing people who then comes and disrespect the laws of your country. I employ you today. It means my labor relations, my labor law does not apply. Coming to a case which we are talking about. Yeah, of course, SAFA's role, I'll focus mainly on SAFA's role. SAFA's role is to coordinate what we call match transfer system, TMS.
Yes, TMS.
With TMS, we have a guy called Chalmers Khoza who's doing a great work. He's one of the unsung heroes of football because all professional clubs know him. They go through him.
He works for the mother body.
He works for the association. And he has done great work for a number of years dealing with these TMS issues. Remember that with Royal AM, there was a sale which took place. When the sale took place, unfortunately, the details were not changed. But remember that the
when you say the details were not changed, you mean
from the official of Bloemfontein Celtic to the official of Royal AM,
as in the contact numbers,
the email address. But the good thing about it is that FIFA says is the responsibility of the club to ensure that at all times their details are right and correct.
But why? Sorry to jump in there, CEO, but why would the club make such a clumsy mistake? It seems basic that if I'm buying a status, it now becomes mine. Everything associated to it now becomes mine. The contact details, the email address, the letterhead on a document, whatever the case may be, it now moves from Bloemfontein Celtic.
Look, Mazola, I don't want to be blaming the club or be prejudicing anyone, because when it happens I was not there. But when I came back, I got hold of the documents. Remember that the changes need to be effected by the federation at the insistence of the club. The club must write a letter and say to the federation, this is now me doing this, and there is that allegation in inverted commas to say we had submitted, and the federation, that's how you say they tried to drag it. But of course there was another leg of what we call the legal portal. From 2023, FIFA introduced what we call FIFA legal portal, where you have a case, you initiate it on the portal and all communication is done there. So there were a lot of things on that case when it comes to portal and TMS. But of course, at the end of the day, the regulation puts responsibility on the club. Well, the version and that of the player, one cannot get much into it, because at the end there is a decision, and one will deal with the principles. Once there is a judicial decision, it can only be overturned by a judicial body higher than that. In football, we know that CAS is the highest.
Correct.
Unless if you want to challenge it, you need to challenge it in court, but you can't challenge it in the courts of South Africa. It needs to be in the courts of Switzerland, where there is this, and we know where we are sitting that Royal M did not exercise that. What are the fundamental challenges when you have those kind of rulings? The tax. Because FIFA will put a fee there, and there are cases where it was determined that a tax needs to be deducted. So I think Royal AM's issues now is around tax issues. What happened to tax issues? Do I give the player this amount as per ruling? Will I be compliant with the tax or not? So those are kind of issues which, if you are represented, because remember this matter was dealt with just on a narrow issue, they did not get to the merits. It was just on the procedure of service, whether it was that and case said there was service. But if I was representing one there, I'll ask about the tax implications. So they did not have that chance. But does that mean that they should not comply? South African laws will compel them to comply. And my belief is both them and the player need to sit down and find each other on that issue. But at the end of the day, Royal AM has an obligation to comply with the ruling, whether they like it or not.
Could we ever have a case where, I suppose, I don't know if it would fundamentally change the FIFA statutes in terms of player contracts or the nature of contracts of international players, where disputes are handled by a national resolution chamber, or it will always be a case where an international player, when there's a breach of contract or a dispute, they go straight to FIFA. They don't even exhaust the legal framework within the country or the committees involved in trying to solve that dispute locally.
FIFA has introduced what we call the NDRC dispensation, where we are as a country, we are not compliant. Should we be compliant?
What's missing? Why are we not compliant?
I'll come to that. Okay. Should we be compliant? This will not give the players the leeway of going direct to FIFA.
So it is possible. We can have. Okay, I'm getting too. I'm jumping the boat here. I'm jumping the gun.
We can, and it's just you need all stakeholders to be represented in these panels. You need players union, you need the federation, and you need the league to say these are our preferred arbitrators. These are our preferred people who will deal with NDRC. Submit to FIFA to say all stakeholders have bought into it and they have agreed to it. And then you're good to go. You not have these problems of people going outside the counter.
Okay. So the mother body, the league.
Players, recognized because, South Africa, you must be very particular.
Yes, because
the recognized players union which has signed a recognition agreement with the professional league, because remember, SAFA deals with amateur, the league deals with professional.
Yes.
So the league and clubs becomes the employer. So the union representative, the union must then sign that collective bargaining agreement,
which SAFPU have signed. I don't know about these other unions that.
That's why I say I just needed to qualify it to say they're recognized.
Yes. Which for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, it would be then SAFPU because they have a bargaining agreement with the league.
I hear from you and I will not comment. Okay. I don't want tomorrow to be saying you are biased to this, but
okay.
Yeah. So once you have that forum and it is agreed upon without any objections, you submit to FIFA. This is the process we have done. Then they recognize you are NDRC. You no longer have to go that route.
You said you will get to, unless I missed it, the reason why we are non-compliant.
The reason why we are non-compliant, of course, it has been a struggle. We had at some point started it. Maybe my departure affected it. At some point, myself, Michael Murphy, and the union, we had met and started. Remember, you must still also have the competent regulations to govern it. So it's not just a process of saying the three meet and say we want Mazola in this one and no.
Yeah.
You must have your regulations which are approved by FIFA.
Correct.
So I think that process. The decision making, because when it must first go to PSL must be happy with it, submit it to SAFA must take it through legal and constitutional committee. After it has passed legal and constitutional committee, it must then go to the national executive committee.
Yeah. And does FIFPro come in any way here? Does the union also have to be recognized by FIFPro, or it's neither here nor there, as long as the league and SAFA recognize this?
The basic requirement is that it should have the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
It should prove that it represents majority of players.
Okay.
So that's what the regulation says currently. They don't say anything about FIFPro recognition.
Yeah.
So I think early next year we need to restart the process and say, where are we? Can we fast track it? Can we complete it? It's doable, and I believe that with the right minds on the table, it will be done.
I mean, there are so many clubs now under these FIFA bans. I mean, the list is endless and, quite frankly, maybe a little bit embarrassing as well. Royal AM, Kaizer Chiefs, Morocco Swallows, Richards Bay, TX Galaxy, Marumo Gallants recently. Chipa United,
Swallows has been there.
Swallows, more than half of the 16 top flight teams. JDR in the lower division, and I'm sure a few others that I'm missing and I can't remember at the moment. Shouldn't that have been enough reason for SAFA and PSL and the unions to come together quickly enough to get this over the line?
Look, I will not be unfair to all those who are involved, because this NDRC regulations of FIFA came in 3-4 years back. It has always been a norm that you must go there. So it may be unfair to say it should have pushed them into action, but it's something which needs to be done. And is given the agency it deserves. Part of the role I need to do is to come with a clear legal framework for the association. And of course, we'll time and again engage with the league and say, how do we move forward? So for me, it's it might have taken long, but it does not necessarily say people have dropped the ball.
Yeah.
Because you see, even FIFA itself keeps on amending those regulations. So you need to get the regulations. Once you get the regulations, fine, then you can decide about the personnel.
Do you think international players are also taking advantage of this? And I mean, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm on the FIFA website and I have a look at the number of African clubs that are being banned by the world governing body, far supersedes their European counterparts. Is it clumsiness on our part as African clubs and African federations, or it's these players have found a loophole and they are using it to the maximum ability?
Let's start about the first one. It's not about the clubs. It's about the regulations themselves. UEFA have the proper NDRC. They resolve their issues within their dispute resolution. So most European or most developed countries have that system in place.
They meet the criteria.
Because when you see, you must look at the cases of CAS, where they involve player disputes. They may not necessarily be coming out of the FIFA DRC. They will be coming from the dispute resolution of this federation, and then they move to FIFA. So if you look at the cases which are being dealt with, as you rightfully say, it involves Africa, it involves your smaller federations because of the dispute resolution mechanisms in place.
Yes.
But also, we should not just blame it on that. Because I don't think that it's a coincidence that everyone, whether you represent yourself or you go there with a lawyer or you don't, the clubs are found wanting. Something might be wrong in how we do our contracts. Something may be wrong on us not honoring our contracts. Because sometimes you are sold Mazola and you are told Mazola is going to deliver. When he does not deliver, people result in
want to terminate.
In not following the right termination process or in not paying the salaries which they've agreed about. So it's not only the question of the legal framework. It's the question of, do I have a contract? Do I honor it? And like I say, you look at the rate, the famous player from Madagascar who came to Chiefs.
Yes.
At the end of the day, Chiefs was ordered to pay.
Yeah.
And wherever they took it, it ended up paying them to pay. You have, when I was doing this course, Chippa was given as example to say in South Africa, you have a club called Chippa United. Was it a fair thing to say, yeah, well, because of cases which are there? So it is important for our clubs also to check, how do I terminate my contract? How do I put a contract which protects me in instances like that?
So it's not a matter of resources necessarily. It's more administrative and how we go about, as you say, the process of termination, and when we breach the contract, to be able to come to an amicable arrangement in terms of parting ways.
What I've learned is that once you are on the back foot, it's not easy for players to accept. At some point, players agree with you genuinely to say, let's terminate. Then they struggle to find another job. They go to FIFA and say, I was unfair. But those cases normally get kicked out. There was another case of a South African club where a player decided to terminate and went to FIFA and said, I've been unfairly terminated. And the club produced all the evidence. And that matter was dismissed.
Yeah, okay.
But it's worrisome that you have majority of decisions against clubs. It means there is something which clubs are doing wrong, which needs to be rectified. And it lies in the contracts. The contract they enter with players needs to be clear on termination.
So I know it's a bit tricky, especially because of our dynamics in South African football, that whereas in most countries, the federation runs the league. Whereas here in South Africa, it's a bit different. It's political, but we won't get too much into that. My question is really around whether SAFA cannot have a standard template of a contract that the clubs should just follow suit, and then maybe just in an instance where you just put amounts there and certain terms and conditions that the agents and the club can agree on, but the mother body sets a template for a contract to avoid these sort of things.
The league has a template. When you join, remember in my stint, I had a stint with a club in the NFD. The league gives you that. The question is whether are we doing much work which is required to then modify it and suit your situation. Because remember, a template, it's a guideline. And there are things which will be unique to a Mazola and a club issues. So most of the NFD clubs are found wanting because they take it as it is and want to move with it as it is. So you need to modify it. When you say a player has failed to perform, you need to justify that. It's one difficult thing legally to
justify
non-performance. But if you have systems in place, you can justify it.
Yeah, that's why even in the normal working space, when an employee goes to the CCMA, most of the time they'll win the case because it as you say, it's very tough to prove non-performance.
So you need to have a different set of rules. But as long as you get your contracts, you know that this contract is tied, it protects me and protect. Look, we don't want it to be tied to disadvantage another party, but it must protect both rights.
Yeah.
And as you rightfully say, one thing which also delayed this process, to get the union recognized, it was a process also.
Yeah, it took a while.
It took a while. So I think now that the union... if the union have signed, let me not say now that, if the union have signed a collective bargaining agreement, it makes life easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll follow up. I think very soon we're going to have SAFPU General Secretary Nhlanhla Shabalala here. He should be able to also sort of weigh in on this discussion. Speaking of structure and processes, I'm going to shift a little bit because we've got a lot to discuss. And on that FIFA topic alone, we could probably spend 3 hours. But I want to move to a subject that I know is close to my heart. And from our discussion, I know it's close to your heart as well in terms of development compensation fees. We had, unfortunately, when Everett De Bruin was here, we didn't have a lot of time to discuss that because that's something that as a lawyer as well, he's been working at. Can you briefly explain what that looks like and how SAFA is working at ensuring that academy clubs or whoever is developing players gets to benefit from this money that my understanding is that is being made available to those who are developing players that go on to become superstars or not, or sign professional contracts. But here locally, a lot of the academies are crying. Is it because they don't know how to follow the guidelines and the processes, or again, it's just there's a loophole somewhere that a lot of the clubs are getting away with?
Yeah, I think it's more also, it goes back to administration also, because where I'm sitting, nobody can stand up and claim for a compensation for development, because the regulations are not yet approved. I know they are there. I left them there intact.
I must say, CEO, that's sad, because there are so many players that are coming from grassroots level that those who are...
But it's not the only dynamic.
Okay.
Remember, you have two types of fees which are due. When a player under 23 years first signs his professional contract, that's where this fee of development and applies. Unfortunately, in other countries, when a club identifies Mazola, they also take him to school. That's why it includes education.
Yeah.
In South Africa, you only have the Cape Town Space Academy and few of those who are schooling these kids. And then you have solidarity. Solidarity goes to contract, first professional contract and the contract you sign after. Recently, FIFA made a decision on the Lyle Fosler solidarity and said this specific amount is due to the clubs which have developed the player. So, as far as you can get right regulations in place tomorrow, are the clubs doing their duty? I had clubs come in to say, I've developed Mazola, but they don't have proof.
Yeah.
And Mazola, because he's been told by an agent, he says, I don't know. This club, no. So it's important for us to also.
So how do you prove this?
You need to produce that this player played for me for this season and this season.
So tlamehile systeming somewhere. I mean, what if you are in somewhere in the rural areas where you've got a pitch, you've got soccer boots, you've got a few kids playing there, and then at the age of 13, 14, someone comes and snaps them up, and when they turn 18, they sign a professional contract, but there was no way. You didn't take pictures, you didn't write anywhere, but you are responsible.
Maybe we need to qualify what is training.
Okay.
Because if I get group of boys playing, am I training them? I'm not training them. I'm not. And we must be honest about it.
Okay.
Because most people miss it. That, I call my boys, we go and play with another zone. Did I develop anyone? No, I just organize kids to go and play.
Yeah.
Development and training is specific. One, you have a right person training these kids. They are participating in a formal football of some sort. And when you play in a formal football, it will not take you much to prove that you have developed players so and so.
When you say formal, you mean what?
In a league of some sort.
The Chappies Little League or something like that, yeah.
Because they are governed by a structure.
Yes.
So that structure will say, for us to know Mazola, we'll need a card.
Yeah.
That cut of chappies which may have not mattered in 2012 will now come and matter. That
because it's sufficient proof that he was a registered player
and you
at
show
the
that
time.
He has played in this league. I've registered him in this league.
Yeah.
Well, in this year of technology, I think my SAFA
correct
brought at least stability in that from 6 years, once you get into the system, you have a special FIFA designated number. That number follows you where you are going.
It stays with you right there.
Yes. In fact, other countries, they are not using my SAFA. They are using FIFA Connect, which I think in time South Africa must move to it because it interlinks all these leagues. Your professional league, your amateur league. So once you register Mazola with that number, then it's alert that there is compensation due to so and so. And I think once we do that and have player passports, because you can only get player passports from the system itself and use them. FIFA is now introducing a domestic registration platform, which will be more like what you do on TMS, which follows the history of a player. Clubs will then get justice on what they are complaining. But also clubs need to understand that for them to be able to claim, because there are challenges with that.
Yeah.
You find a club deep down in rural areas. I've developed Mazola. Mazola went and played for a club in the 3rd division known as ABC Motsepa, or 4th division Hollywood Birds League. They spot the player. Chief spots the player. Pirates spot the player. Or anyone professional spot the player. And Mazola refused with the clearance. I can't give you clearance because I need to be compensated. That's not how we do things. You give the clearance. Once a player has signed the professional contract, that's when you start to be liable for that developmental fee. And of course, the other question is MDC a professional? No, it's not. If a player is playing for MDC, you can't go to a team and say, I want to claim for my compensation because he is not professional.
Yeah, it's an amateur league.
It's an amateur.
Yeah. And it even has an age cap at the moment, because I saw that document.
And also in line with PSL or NSL handbook, clubs are also allowed to register players as amateur. So if you need to tick all the boxes to say Mazola is now signed a professional contract. Can they pay when he turns if he signs even when he's above the age of 23? Yes, they can pay. Solidarity addresses that. So clubs need to play their role. The association will get rules in place. And of course, clubs are willing to pay. Sometimes clubs just become, I trained Mazola for 6 months. I want 5 million rand. Unnecessarily difficult.
Yeah. What's the minimum and the max to claim? Or it just depends on the number of years?
That's what the regulations needs to determine. If you know that in 2004, when it was introduced, FIFA was talking about age, linking it to percentages. They will say if you got a player from 12 years to 15 years, it's 7%, it's 12%. PSL in its book had different amounts, which they were saying they are due when player signs. When they get a player from your third, fourth, fifth. So clubs complained and say, no, this money is too little. So that's where the association must come in and regulate it and be realistic.
Yeah.
Because if we are not realistic, we'll just put amounts there. Nobody will be able to pay those amounts.
Yeah, because in the past, for instance, I covered a story of some players, I think it was Kaizer Chiefs, who, long story short, they were getting rid of the players now, saying you are either suspended or we are letting you go. But they wanted, for instance, a Puso Di Tejano, who then moved to TX Galaxy. They wanted 1.5 million. And the question was around how did they, how do clubs, do you feel, come to that figure? Is that where the federation then comes in?
That's where the federation needs to regulate it and say for one season from this league, it will be this much.
Yeah.
But for it to work, they need to be discussion between the league and the association.
Yeah.
So that you can meet, you can have the middle ground, because once it becomes like, we'll give you 20 rand when you have invested 500,000 in a player, also it's unfair.
Yeah. Are there some good stories? Are there some clubs who are paying these developmental fees, or it's all around just fight after fight, academies coming to SAFA, cap in hand, crying that they developed so and so, but they're not getting paid for it?
You must give some of the clubs credit. They do pay. They do ask a player, where have you played?
Yeah.
And they go and agree with clubs. More often clubs agree, then later want to renegade on that agreement. They invite you after the facts. They just agree.
They agree when they are desperate to get the player to their training base.
Not the professional clubs. The amateur clubs. They say to them, we'll buy you a kit, we'll buy you soccer balls. He agrees.
Yeah.
It's an agreement, whether it's right or wrong, but it's an agreement.
Yeah.
But if you want to get it right, you need to then do your research and be able to have a discussion of some sorts. But I can safely tell you that big clubs in this country, they do check and they do pay. But we still have problematic clubs, which that every time there is an issue of compensation, it will involve Mazola United.
Yeah.
But others do. And one needs to appreciate the fact that they recognize the development role played by one old man down there in the Bundus who comes in and they do compensate where there is evidence.
Yeah. And that moves us nicely to probably what would be one of the last few topics. I'm looking at my list here of topics in terms of what we can cover, but I wanted to talk about agents because they do play a role here. I keep asking club chairmen, agents themselves and lawyers. I have seen a list circulating of a list of agents. And my question was, is this the mother body, indicating or suggesting to clubs who to work with on the back of that popular exam? We know that it's been happening all over the world where agents are fighting back. They don't want to write the exam. Some do because inevitably that's what you have to do to be a registered agent within your federation or to be recognized by FIFA. Maybe explain the sudden switch in going the exam route and that list, what it means in the bigger picture of clubs and agents working together.
First, let's start where it started. The exams are not starting now. The exams were there before the dispensation of intermediaries. Intermediaries created a problem. It became a very disorganized space because then Mazola can represent the son and the son, and the dealings with the clubs never worked. And in the PSLN book, they then decided agents, whoever has dispute as an agent must go to the federation. How do you then recognize them? Then FIFA came in with the new dispensation of exams because they saw that process is not working. So this dispensation of exams says you must first pass the exam. After passing the exam, you must then... Agents are not fighting for exams. They are fighting against the percentage which FIFA says they can charge. Exams are not a problem because they were there before. And that's why even now when you moved to these exams of agents, they then looked for historically your Jasmine, your Mike McCup, who have written in the past. They had what they call legacy program to recognize them and put them in the system.
So they didn't have to.
They did not have to go the process of the new ones. So what regulations on agents says, for you to be recognized, you must pass exam. And what are the obligation of the clubs? The clubs must work with only recognized agents. The association or federation has an obligation to publicize who passed, and you have that list being updated time and again. The last exam, about 80 people wrote and 8 passed. We are one of the countries which has a lot of people who are writing. Unfortunately, the pass rate is not that much. Mostly it's lawyers who are passing. I don't know what's the secret with that, but it's lawyers which are passing. So in terms of the regulations, remember in the past, when you written the agent exams, you'll be restricted to South Africa because you wrote in South Africa. Now FIFA has taken over the whole system. Once you pass, you are an international recognized.
You can.
That's the advantage of it. But clubs which then deals with you as an agent which is not recognized, one, you have no place to lodge your dispute. Because nobody knows you in football. You are a fly by night, if I can say. So you'll not be recognized. If you agree, you take a player and they don't pay you. If a player decides after signing with you that I no longer want you, that contract can easily be null and void. It's not protected by anyone anywhere. So that's why I think it has nicely regulated that space. Because you had agents who had complaints, who had dispute, but there was no way to lodge them. But now when you are recognized, you had power to go to your association and say, can I have arbitration? I have a problem with a player and a club. Because most of the time people think that agents only have a problem with clubs. No, sometimes it's with players. Players says, no, but you're not pushing my interest. I want to leave you, forgetting that they've signed an agreement with you. So those exams protect you. But we also protect the clubs by showing who are the real agents and who are not the agents, which are recognized.
I suppose, I mean, there is the good and the bad in that maybe clubs prefer to work with certain agents. So if they, because they know their dealings over the years. So now suddenly, if they are not registered, my question is, can they continue to work with people that they prefer to work with? But knowing that there could be ramifications to that, should they be a dispute or they don't see eye to eye? Are they being this new policy, if I can call it like that, or document, or whatever the direction that FIFA is taking? Is it forcing club? Is it a matter of forcing, or it's mainly just to say, here's a guideline, whether you go this route or not is up to you?
It's in terms of regulations, it's a compliance issue. Clubs must work with recognized agents.
Yeah.
This is to protect the space. And I know people look at it in a narrow mind of saying, like what you are saying, I've worked with this guy, I understand him for some time. What about this guy who goes to parents and say, I'm an agent? I've dealt with cases where South African players were taken to foreign countries. Players, young boys were molested.
Yeah.
There is a person who said, I'm an agent, and took kids to England. They were sleeping on the streets. Equally, there are people who brings kids here. You know, human trafficking is rife, and people wants to use football to make money in an underhand way. So if you are dealing with that person who is not recognized, who's not known by anyone, it becomes more of a problem, because whatever he does, even the illegal means, you can't relate and say, but is he on the database? Is he a proper agent? Does he understand what are the expectations from an agent? Because agency is not about identifying a player and putting the player in a professional setup. There are obligations which they need to meet. When you deal with under 12s, you'd see even agents who pass exams and they don't have safeguarding, they don't have the safeguarding certificate. They cannot represent any player under the age of 18. And FIFA make it specific. Once you are told you have passed, says Mr. Mazola, you have passed, but you can't represent these players. Because there are a lot of things happening in that space. People have robbed poor parents and saying there is this thing in Gauteng, I'm taking your players. We have seen players staying in hostels where they are no longer even going to school. So when you have a proper agent, he will know that it is in his best interest to train this player properly, to have this player getting the required education, and of course to protect the interest of the player financially. So the brother, I know you, always does not end well.
Yeah, it doesn't end well indeed. Let's wrap it up with, I don't know if you have an opinion on this COO minimum wage. I mean, it brings us to the topic of recognized unions, collective bargaining agreements, and so on and so forth. But from what, some of my guests and just interviews in general with club chairmen and agents, South African football is not quite there yet. Is there a reason why we still haven't hit the minimum wage agreements, either from as soon as players turn pro, or I suppose it's tricky at an amateur level, but when you've signed a professional contract, to have a standard of where the package should start from?
Look, I think one needs to give credit to the chairman of the league, which says one of the legacies he wants to leave is to ensure that clubs are self-sustainable. Because once you don't get that sustainability, you can put a figure there. Is it going to be reasonable? Is it going to be affordable? Because reasonability and affordability, those are key issues. It's easy for the government to say, give this minimum wage. And you can see the figures are always low. But here we are dealing with athletes who don't have that lack of pension, who has a short career. So you need to consider all those. But on the other hand, you need to then say, is it affordable? If we say it's 30,000 in the NFG or the Motsepe Foundation Championship, how many owners are going to sustain that?
Very few.
Because you don't want to put a minimum wage and increase number of disputes, because at the end of the month, Mazola says, I can't afford it. On the month which I travel. Remember, the league gives you the grant so that you honor your games. So once it goes there, you need to then generate more income. And you need to salute these club owners, because most of them are doing it at the expense of their families. But we need a system which will recognize what they are doing. We need support, financial support, either from the government or from the commercial, the business. But one thing which you must know, Mazola, when you travel around the continent, I'm a club licensing instructor for CAF. I've been to a number of countries. We have a special thing in place. We need to sustain it. Most often we look at it, we become short-sighted. But with the economy of this country not being friendly, you must know these players have families, they are feeding families, extended families. So we need that, but it's something which you cannot just say, guess it and say. It may collapse the league. We have seen countries where the leagues have collapsed. I was in Namibia. Namibia, they don't know whether they are professional or amateur. Yeah. It's just a disorganized setup. Yeah. It's not only them. You go to Mozambique, they tell you how much players earn in their league. They are 16 this year. Next year, they go to 12. So we have a good thing going. We should not rush to implement some of the thing to its detrimental. I was motivated when the chairman says, this is what I want, the legacy I want to leave. Clubs being self-sustainable, because remember in South Africa it's not only about paying salaries. When you hire a stadium, I know when I deal with national teams how much is paid just to use that stadium. You need to comply with sports regulation. It's money. You need certain number of security personnel for that game. Yeah. And it applies even for clubs. So you need a model which will speak to that. Maybe government needs to come in and say, we'll give facilities at a special rate. There is also a call for a special tax dispensation. And maybe you'll be talking to the secretary of SAFA COO who has been advocating for it to say, maybe as football, let's go and engage SARS and say, how do we get special dispensation looking at the length of the career itself? And now we mitigate the players suffering after playing professional, because it is just the length is short, but many things can happen, can be injured and no longer be able to play. So those kind of things needs to be looked at.
There's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration.
But yes, it is needed. How we get into it, it's important. How we work towards it, it's important. It must not be to the detrimental of the league, because you're going to put a figure there. Most clubs will not be able to pay it. What happens to them? The clubs perishes, they dies. You start with 16, you end up with 12.
And that's not good business.
That's not good business, because remember, once you lose 2 teams, how many people are then now officially unemployed? So my opinion is, pay people reasonably. You don't expect a player to be earning 1,000 rand. It's an insult. Pay people reasonably while we are working towards that. But it's something which needs a very serious consideration. But it must be something which is practical, implementable, and affordable.
On that note, COO, let's leave it there, because this topic around minimum wage will pick it up with the SG when he sits on the hot seat there. And there's a lot to unpack, as we did in this episode as well. So catch this episode of Behind the Boot with Super Journal. It drops on Tuesday at 6 p.m. on all our SmashSports platforms.